Hi, and welcome to another edition of Hippo Brain. Here is where we have hippo-sized conversations with people with hippo-sized brains. Today's guest is a very, very interesting lady. She is the founder and CEO of DViO. DViO, as I speak to her, is not an agency. It is an independent integrated marketing services company that is digital first. Now that's interesting. And Sowmya started this and she calls us as an entrepreneur from the age of 16 onwards. So we will go through some of these journeys with her. We'll go through some of her life lessons, stories, and her campaigns that she's proud of, and how she's managed to create this independent marketing services company. I was going to say agency again, and I think I'm going to get slapped by her. But before we start and we move into the women entrepreneurship as well, I just wanted to talk and ask a slightly more provocative question, Soumya. आज independent रहना is almost impossible in the agency side or in the marketing services side. And to grow, it requires some amount of wherewithal from the parent, either to buy media or to hold that kind of media buying or to look at clients that are coming in internationally. And right now, as we're speaking to you, you are not speaking from your India office, but your Dubai office. You even expanded there. How does it work and how tough it is to be independent, survive and thrive and get these clients and work in a cutthroat environment?
Yeah. So, Jaimit, as you can imagine, as the company was growing and we had reached a sizable number, which I think is around 2015, 16. And that was also the time when, the acquisition was sort of the norm of digital first companies, which had reached, a certain stage. So we were, of course, approached and it was new to me. So I wasn't averse to the idea, and I wanted to know more about it and figure out what it could mean for us. So the fact is that we did have a lot of conversations, but as we had those conversations, what I realized was that one, and I'm sort of, this is a little deep, okay? Where at one level, I wasn't like any of the larger companies who are going to acquire us. Okay. So in terms of how we were modeled and how we were even structured, it was so unique to us. Okay. And what it left me with is that if we end up becoming a part of some of these larger companies, we'd become like them, or they'd want us to become like them. Okay. Because we have to fit into a structure, which would be basically counterproductive, because we grew the way we grew is because of our uniqueness, right? And what I also realized is that, interestingly, there are companies which are sort of modeled through their understanding of other companies. These are the companies which are built structurally also in a way that they can be acquired. Okay. But when I started the business, it was so organic, and it was more adaptive to what the markets really needed. And we didn't follow any structure or model. And that is how, we plugged in the startup incubator into the system, had them add a lot of value. Then there was creative, of course, brand and creative. And then we started a full-fledged technology business. We pivoted into new businesses. So the way we were sort of growing, it didn't fit into any one structure that somebody could really use to buy us out, right? And even if they did, they wouldn't know how to use us, right? So then I realized that there is a huge opportunity for somebody like us who is really grown by having their ears to the market, have really grown by being adaptive and very sensitive to things that are happening around, and work towards modeling the business to be able to create a solution for the clients. There's a huge opportunity for somebody like us to be multi-country and still be independent. Because after this big 4 or 5 guys, is there an opportunity for somebody like us to be independent and still multi-country, I thought there was a huge yes there. And that is how, the journey of or the decision to sort of stay independent and be multi-country came about for me.
And Sowmya, you did one very interesting thing at that time. You bought out your investors. So tell us about that. And that too with your own funds, no investor. You own the company 100%.
Yeah.
Manage that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was a minority shareholder. I started this initiative or business at the age of 22. With my father has been a government servant all his life. There is no, and we are a TAM, if you're familiar with this whole TAM Bram family and culture, you would know that we'd be happy to become CEOs of large companies, but khud ka paisa dal ke dhanda karna is not something that is, it's not in our DNA. So in that sense, there was really no business background that I came with. But I had a mind of my own from a very early age. So when this began, I had this traditional media company owners who were happy to sort of, just open up their network to me of businesses and sort of help me or allow me to share their office space. And that's how it all began, actually. And but then the company grew very quickly. I believe because when you don't know what you're starting out for, you tend to undervalue yourself. I think that's also been a big learning for me. So I was happy to start with a 10% equity for, the company.
Which year was this, Sowmya?
Was 2011.
Interesting.
2011, yeah. So, and as the company grew, I saw that from 10% to kahan tak leke jaungi main, so obviously as the organization was growing, with me being the active business driver, and the other investors being sort of dormant, even for us to go out into the market and find value was not something that was feasible, right? And those were some of the, that was a time at which these discussions were also happening. In the 4-5 years that the company grew, that's when we had interest from the network agencies to buy us. But again, why would they buy a company which was being driven by a lady who was owning a minority, and then actually spend the money to buy out the other investors, right? So those were some of the challenges that, we faced even when those conversations were happening. And having said that, it wasn't, after all those conversations, like I mentioned to you, it wasn't something I was inclined towards. I saw that, what I had built by then would get dissolved in some way if we get bought out, so a decision had to be taken. They wanted to exit the business, and, I wanted to continue to run the business, but I didn't want to sell out to anyone. So this was the only option I had. So I said, let me just take the leap of faith. I was confident about the way the business was growing and what we had to do. So that's how it happened. So yes, so obviously it involved bank debt and valuing the company and, buying them out. And, there was मेरे नाम पे property एक ही थी जो मेरा घर था, which also was co-owned by my husband. तो और कुछ तो था नहीं मॉर्गेज करने के लिए, तो घर मॉर्गेज किया कंपनी खरीदने के लिए, सो
Seriously?
या एक घर था, उसको मॉर्गेज किया कंपनी खरीदने के लिए. So of course, even some of our consultants advised us against it. So he said, you don't know what kind of anxiety you're putting yourself into, but then I guess एक चीज होती है जिसको बोलते हैं entrepreneur's call. So it's no matter what consultant, what coach, what tells you what, it's just, that morning 5 minutes of meditation which tells you what is the right thing to do, and you go for it.
This is crazy, this is exactly why people like me can never become. हम लोग को EMI दिखता है, तो हम कभी नहीं बन पाएंगे, और entrepreneur ऐसा होता है, उसको घर दिखता है, इसको गिरवी कर देते हैं.
Yeah, but 2017, late 17, this whole thing sort of happened between 16 and 17. By 2000, mid 18, we were debt free. so, I had the calculation in place, what are we making month on month? How am I going to plow that back into the company? So that was there, so one quarter here and there calculation went off, but so we were debt free.
Sowmya, one question. Great, this is a fantastic story. It's an entrepreneur's journey, a hero's journey, as it's called, a monomyth. You talked about the factors which made DViO unique.
Yeah.
Almost like Hydra-like. You said you were doing digital, non-digital, brand, creativity, mad tech, incubator. Yeah. So tell us about DViO.
Yeah.
How have you grown? How have you expanded? What are the things you do? What made you all unique?
Yeah. So I think it's so closely connected, Rajesh, with my personal journey, right? At the age of 16, I was, so 15 saal se I have been like, I've always been itching to do something that creates value. So I was writing for, newspapers. I was writing columns for newspapers. I was doing some creative work here and there. I in fact worked with a production company and I was hosting a weekly video magazine for them. So I just tried so many different things, So there was an itch to constantly add value to myself and whatever I see as significant in the world, right? So at one level, and interestingly, after my 12th, I told, my parents, again, Tambram family comes with a template, engineer nahi, doctor nahi, arts karna hai, English literature padna hai, kyun? Why would you want to study English literature? But then my father was also aware of my very keen interest in technology. He's saying, tu technology pad le, tu English literature kyun pad rahi? मैंने कहा technology तो ऐसे भी सीख जाऊंगी मैं, मुझे literature पढ़ना है. So that combined with my natural love for technology and exploring it, literature, communication, then there was a .com company that I was sort of running for someone else, of course. It was called 15to25.com. फिर वो 2 साल चलाया. Then I ran an engineering services company for my uncle. So in a way, the whole faculties of my brain were always wired in some sense to be an entrepreneur or run a business, right? But then imagine the background that I had, which is I studied English literature. I was writing columns for newspapers, which means that there was some level of creative brain that I had. I had a natural love for technology. I ran an engineering services company without any, when you're young, you have no limitations, and you have no identity, career nahi banana hai, tumko sirf explore karna hai. So, so I didn't identify myself as somebody being in a particular field. And so therefore, DViO turned out to be very beautifully at the intersection of how you communicate what you communicate, which is creative and content, right? Technology, right? Which is being able to really see what intervention businesses need to, what intervention technology can do for the businesses you're working with. Natural, sort of way of looking at numbers and the bottom line, right? So there's creative, there's tech, there's data, and then there is sort of this drive to drive the business for your clients. And so therefore, even though we were digital first, some of our creative campaigns are mind blowing, so because we understand brand, we understand creative, we understand the storytelling, how to tell the story of, uniquely tell a story of a brand. But then all of that through the lens of technology, saying how can you improve, how can you make this business unique by adding technology layers to this business. And then end of it, is it all making sense in terms of bottom line? So none of this just for the sake of a PR value, or it's not for just sake of being different, but are you adding to the bottom line? And that's how we built out of these 175 people that I mentioned to you about, almost 65-70 people are just pure creative people. They're content people, creative people who are telling stories. And this entire team of ours is called DFA, that's Design for Action. Okay, so this creative studio of ours has been modeled on DFA, which means that what we are doing is we're creating storytelling for a digital first world. So we're natively studying each platform and saying how best can a story be delivered on the platforms that people are consuming today. And that's what DFA does. So now this is a sort of modeling, and plus then we went on to start the incubator 6 years ago. So we said, if you're talking so much about technology, and we believe in the power of how it can, sort of add value to businesses or transform businesses, what's out there in the world which we can bring, which has a very strong advertising, marketing, business application, which is where, that's how Israel trip happened, where I met Jaime, and I've traveled to Hong Kong to recruit startups into the incubator. Some of them from Israel who are now a part of our incubator. A whole bunch of them from India. So how do you then use these platforms or technologies? And some of them are, probably need a pivot into the marketing application. They may not be primarily in the business, the platform may not primarily be serving, maybe it's serving a different business use case, but can have a marketing application. So I have actually worked with these founders to create those pivots, to build those products and plug them in. And some of, and in some sense, this is all something that, the way I look at the businesses, there's a book, very interesting book called Zone to Win. And interestingly, I've actually modeled the business like that, in some sense. It's more like a framework, and I've always been looking for some framework to look at my business. A whole lot of investment for us, my time goes into actually the incubator business. And when I say incubator, everything that you're doing new, which is ears to the ground and is adapting quickly to what we feel the future is going to look like and the market needs. So, and then we were making investments in these startups, right? So none of this was making sense to any large agency in that sense to, to buy us out. Like, they'd want to look at P&L or Excel sheets in very different ways, So that is what I meant when I said that, we structured uniquely. Yeah.
That's very interesting. So you're saying that a large agency tends to look at a P&L, tends to look at billings, tends to look at various different metrics, which honestly, Sowmya, today, I think don't make any sense to you. And you're trying to say, how do I add value? How do I drive outcome? So when we were speaking, the O is on outcome.
Yeah.
Outcome. And that's very interesting. And if you say that if that is going to be core value and that's a part of your name, and then if I'm going to look at various different incubate different companies, etc., that try and deliver this. Any interesting stories over there? Anything that we can pick and say, ye bada interesting campaign hai, ya ye interesting decision liya hai? And can you elaborate on this Zone to Win framework? I'm a little curious on this as well.
Yeah. So Zone to Win, this framework, you have the business, which is what we call as your performance vertical. Okay. That's your ongoing business, whatever, the retainers, the creative services, which sort of toe
keeps
the
you
line.
alive.
Keeps you alive, right? So that's the performance part of the business. So that's one vertical. Then there's a productivity vertical. Okay. So in the productivity vertical, basically you're looking at how do you improve, you have functions that just work towards improving the yield in the performance business. Then then you have the incubation business. So incubation is all service lines, so you're constantly researching. It's like a lab. You're looking at what are the service lines or product lines you want to start? What is the market going to need? How are you going to make sense of what the market is going to need? How does this make sense or align with the overall vision you have for your business? And then start rolling these out. Okay, so there'll be multiple buttons you'll press at the same time and start rolling these out. And then there's a transformation vertical. So transformation vertical is when any of your incubatee service lines or product lines tend to become more than 10% of your overall revenue. That's when you're ready to push that into the sort of main business model. Right. So, and sometimes this whole incubation model tends to, be very resource heavy, very investment heavy, sometimes takes disproportionate amount of the founder CEO.
Founder's time. Correct,
founder's time. And so, so that's how this whole the Zone to Win model works.
So, and the other part of the question was on outcomes. Any interesting examples that you've seen within your incubation companies or among the work that you've done that you can share that has a clear outcome orientation?
Sure. So there is a business that we sort of we have incubated and have investments equity in. It's called Witty Pen. Okay. And they have a platform of over 700 writers. Okay. And for any business that is looking to grow their business organically or drive revenue through a destination like a website, or is dependent on lead gen or e-com, being able to generate value content, right, at that level, literally, like we can produce 700 pieces of content a day,
that is serious scale. Yeah,
that is serious scale. And when you're able to do this, by controlling quality, by controlling subject matter expertise, and you can deliver it, the kind of business value that we've seen it create for our clients is phenomenal. Now, just to give you an example, we have a client in UAE called Jumbo Electronics. They are among the leading electronic retailers, and e-com is a very serious business line for them. They also have a retail model. इनका आज के दिन में more than 80% of the business that we do is being driven through organic.
Interesting.
On e-commerce, only 20% is paid.
Wow, that is serious. Yeah.
Yeah. We've been able to use this. We've been able to use this, our ability to create content at scale, in a way that we've been able to optimize for voice, and achieve featured snippet position on Google that basically defeats anything to do with the top 10 listing, and created scale at, 200, 300, 400% more traffic. I'll give you a small example. iPhone 11 launch हो रहा था दुबई में, और हमने वो iPhone 11 in दुबई का कीवर्ड लिया. एक महीने पहले से the amount of content we created for it and the way we optimized for iPhone 11 in Dubai ended up helping us optimize for voice search and helped us create a featured snippet which took the traffic when iPhone launched up by 300% on the website and created record sales for iPhone 11 for Jumbo. And all because of the way we sort of approach this from the lens of content and optimization.
I wish I hold you there only and don't talk about it, because these are all my secrets on the last 10 years of my life. SEO karo, content acha likho, people will come and write content that people want to consume. There is no big brains about it.
Yeah. And even like, so every month for us now we're looking at, acha, organic se itna ho gaya, abhi paid itna. So paid is in fact competing with organic.
True.
For us, paid is competing with organic. So paisa dalo, paid se transaction lao, because it's a performance team. This is quite interesting how some of these teams compete with each other, right? So so that's how, so this is adding true value. Yeah. So you have a platform. It's not just fancy. It's not about investment in a startup for the sake of it, or, having them incubate for no reason, but it's adding true business value, right?
So Sowmya, if I go back to the zone framework that you talked about,
yeah,
it's very interesting. It's almost like horizons.
Yes.
For a current business, the performance vertical, and you're continuously looking to improve on that.
Yes.
And then you're also building sort of the next horizon businesses.
Yes.
Through your incubator.
Yes.
Which then, once they become big, they sort of go back into the core. That's what you're really doing.
Yes.
Now, if you look ahead to some of the key trends which you're seeing going forward,
yeah,
what kinds of trends are you seeing which have the ability to really transform marketing going forward?
Yeah. So one is, when we speak, and because we are digital first, I think I can say this. What's really happening is that one biggest challenge businesses that are spending a significant amount of money on digital are having is that because of the very complex, complex nature of the digital ecosystem, right? So you have so many channels, so many formats, so many touch points. people are losing, brands are losing the power of a singular brand narrative. Okay. And I think the future of marketing and advertising, which is going to be digital first, is going to be able to find ways to create that singular brand narrative on digital. Okay. And to bring the integrity of brand storytelling back, that I think is at the base is something that, and this is actually what we're trying to also achieve through DFA, by the way. So a very core part of what we do with Design for Action is to build that singular brand narrative across channels, across touch points. So we have measures to make sure that there is that singular brand story coming out no matter what. Then the second trend I see is definitely going to be personalization, right? So given the complex nature of the digital ecosystem, the number of messages people are bombarded with, how do you create that unique personal experience, one-on-one experience for your viewer or for your customer, is going to be the next biggest trend that I see coming up, right? So this is also one of the pillars of DFA, by the way. Personalization is one pillar of DFA. And how do you enable that, right? There's technology that can enable that. How do you enable that through creatives? So all of that coming together to create a very unique experience for the consumer. Then what the second pillar I see is that of conversations. So when I talk about conversation, it's got multiple sort of channels to it. One is, so I look at conversations as voice search. So anything that sort of creates an ease of interface or engagement with technology for a consumer is conversation for me. So whether we call conversations as a part of voice search, or whether we speak about conversational commerce and chatbots that are intuitive and AI and ML enabled, or even conversations when using vernacular languages, which sort of make it easy for the rest of India to interact and engage with digital channels. So all of these for us come under conversations, right? So that is going to be the second trend. Then what I see will be of importance is being able to gamify, everything that you do online. So how do you sort of make the user or viewer a part of your story? Because your interfaces today can enable you to do that, right? And gamification can be a very interesting way to do that, right? So that is the gamification part of it. The third is what we actually call as innovation, or in another word we call it new tasking. Okay, so new tasking is our ability to surprise the viewer, with what he is looking at, because we've changed the context of either the platform or the message entirely, right? Because now, to give you an example, when you're sort of scrolling through your Instagram feeds, there is a certain, you almost have a blind spot, right?
More of the same, the same language across.
Yeah, correct. So how do you, arrest the attention of the viewer by, let us say, making your Instagram feed do something completely different from what he's used to seeing, right? So you're giving a new task to the format that already exists and what people are looking at, right? So, so that's what our studio is constantly doing. Take a format, take a platform, and give it a new task. Imagine differently how you can use this particular format or feature of the platform. And lastly, we are living in a physical, feeling, touching world at the end of the day. So it can't be all digital. And therefore, imagine campaigns or imagine programs that actually get initiated online, but you are able to see a tangible physical impact offline. Right. So that is again something that I see will play out as a trend as we go forward. Yeah. So there's personalization. There is, of course, singular brand narrative. There's personalization. There is conversation. There is gamification. There is innovation or new tasking. And then there is act online, impact offline. Yeah. So these are some of the sort of broad trends that I see will play out.
Interesting, Sowmya. See, I'll tell you what, I've always loved digital. And I think for someone like me, if I don't love digital, I don't have no reason being on my job or doing what I do. But I've always found it very difficult to control a lot of the digital non-performance. Performance बहुत clear है. इतना पैसा डाला, इतना click किया, इतना तेरे को आया. But the creative, the ability to get that little extra click, the ability to look at a better conversion rate, the ability to move things around, creators tend to get bored with it. Creators tend to get irritated with it. Creators tend to like say, I'm going to make the most beautiful looking design thing in the world, but are unable to really say ki impact kaisa. I mean, you're creating design for action. To my mind, by itself, it is a reconciliation of opposites. ये तो हो ही नहीं सकता.
Correct. Very nicely put, Jaymeet. Yeah, exactly.
तो ये हम कैसे लेके आ रहे हो? ये बोलने के लिए बहुत ठीक है सौम्या. मैं तो मानने को तैयार नहीं हूं कि क्रिएटिव्स एट स्केल, एक दो क्रिएटिव भूल से मेरे लाइफ में मिले जो ऐसा सोच के करते हैं आउटकम ओरिएंटेड. यू आर सेइंग 50-60 पीपल आउटकम ओरिएंटेड. नो, आई वांट टू डिस्प्यूट.
प्रेजेंटेशन में बैठ मेरे साथ.
How does it happen? How does it happen?
So, I see. I think one stroke of creative brilliance तो किसी को भी आ जाएगा, right? So DFA is a result, Jaymeet, of 3 years of study at our end. Okay, dissecting campaign after campaign, dissecting best performing ads after best performing ads. Okay, and then arriving at a tool or a set of rules through which the creative gets delivered.
Like
so
a formula?
It is like it's putting science behind creativity and saying that this needs to lend itself to, see, because creativity, the sake of creativity is of no use for anyone. We are in the business of creativity for commerce, right? Or commercial art in that sense. So putting science behind it, and this is an area that is not explored. See, it's somebody like us is very well poised to do that, because we're not a traditional creative company. We are digital first, right? And we are such big believers in building brand narratives, and we really understand brand creative and communication. And then we are also outcome driven. So whatever beautiful creative work we do, we need to make sure it delivers the numbers. तो कहीं तो code होना चाहिए ना? I mean, if we don't build the science for it, who's going to build the science for it? That's how I look at it. And that's the work we've been doing. And
true, I've been screaming hoarse that creative agencies, especially in digital, need, and digital lends itself to digitization and breaking down of all of these concepts. There is a play, and it's not necessarily a formula that is meant to succeed all the time, but it is a formula that keeps changing, and then as long as you keep looking at it, it will give you results.
Correct.
Doing it at scale, वही नहीं आता था मेरे को. आपने superbly कर दिया. Let me quickly pivot to a topic which we like to ask most women entrepreneurs that we meet. Being a lady entrepreneur, in an agency, in a marketing services company, etc., and starting at the age of 22, big, bad world and everything like that. How has your experience been? What are the pushes? How tough has it been? How easy has it been? Sometimes I actually believe sometimes in many ways it's easier, many ways it's tougher. Tell us your story.
So I think first things first, when I sort of go to think about it, now that we've achieved some level of recognition, I still don't call it success. It's just a journey, right? But there's some level of recognition we've got. And when people now ask me this question about whole woman entrepreneurship, quite honestly, it's never occurred to me. It could be my upbringing, perhaps, so I think one thing, in spite of all the things I spoke to you about being in a Tambram family, this differentiation. So woman, girl child is treated as well as, a boy child. And I don't think my parents ever let it occur to me that I'm a girl, and literally like gender is not a part of the conversation, So, so I think as a part of my journey, gender has never occurred to me. It's कभी बैठ के कोई पूछता है तो ध्यान में आता है यार, हाँ साला woman entrepreneur, but but otherwise it's just never occurred. Interestingly, I'll share with you one episode on this. Yahan pe, when we were still building the Middle East business, we went for a pitch to a client. Okay, so it's a company which is bound by Sharia law, so very, very traditional in their outlook. And I knew somebody over there, so we got invited for the pitch. And I have a team of 5 women in our Dubai office. तो 5 लड़कियां चली गई यार वहां पे, पूरे बोर्ड रूम में डिशडाश क्लैड मेन. Okay. But I mean, none of that occurred to me. I mean, none. I'm saying it now in retrospect, but ऐसे कुछ ध्यान में नहीं आया कि इतने there's so many men in the room and we are 5 women in the room making a pitch and all. कुछ ध्यान में आया. Then interestingly, after the pitch was over and I walked out of the room, so this marketing head, who I knew quite well, he came out and he said, do you realize you may have created some sort of a history in this organization? Okay. So I said, why do you say that? He said, I don't remember a time when, all women team has presented to, boardroom full of, our management team. And we won the business, by the way. Okay, and they are still our clients. This is the 4th or 5th year of our business with them, and we're very, very sort of going strong. We're going strong with them. So जब तक तुम अपने आप को देखते नहीं हो ना, like when gender doesn't come in the way of the way you look at things, it doesn't matter, honestly. It's for the world to look at you like that and decide whatever they want to. But it's never been a part of my narrative in my own brain.
And Sowmya, how's been the entrepreneurial journey? What are the ups and downs when you look back? I mean, you started at a very early age.
Yeah.
What are those sort of highs and lows? And I keep saying, that for an entrepreneur, there are more lows than highs.
Yeah.
Because you're always going to work every day to sort of reduce the risk of failure.
Yeah.
So how has that journey been? Tell us about that, about some of the high points and low points.
Yeah. So Rajesh, I've in some way been quite blessed because I got a business coach or a life coach very early in my life, okay, who I've sort of titled as a business or life coach, but he doesn't call himself like that at all. But I think some fundas of life got really clear to me very early in life. Your brain is a meaning-making machine. Okay, so it is constantly looking at things that are happening to you and making meaning of it. Now, the question is whether the meaning that you're making of what is happening to you is empowering or making you feel like a victim. The choice is yours. And, unfortunately, and I don't know why this happens with human beings, but more than 60 to 70% of the thoughts that come to your mind are negative. Okay. And you have to, it's a process of training your brain. Actually, it's a process of training your brain to give empowering meaning to any situation that comes your way. And with all the highs and lows that have happened in my life, I think the only thing that I have done is paused, stepped back, decided to give it the meaning that I want to give, made it into a context that is empowering for me, and taken it forward from there, right? So I think that is one learning, giving anything that happens in your life meaning is your choice. So that's one. The second is life में किसी चीज को बड़ा नहीं समझने का. So never think of anything as big, because when you do that, you are already declaring yourself as small. And that you're creating that gap or distance between where you want to go and where you are today, right? So then it's already making it inaccessible in some sense. So no matter what, even when I was quite a small sort of an outfit and, when we were growing, I could sit in front of an entrepreneur who runs $1 billion business, because being an entrepreneur is a great equalizer, by the way. It's a great equalizer. Because you could be running $1 billion business, okay? Maybe I'm doing a few crores of business, but it's binary. It's binary. It's 0 or 1, okay? And how much you grow your business is a direct result of your own growth, your personal growth, your expansion, right? Your personal expansion and growth. So I could really sit with anybody not having a frame of reference as big. And that has helped us really scale up quickly. Okay, so that's been my other sort of big learning as an entrepreneur. Third would be to show up. Yeah, you know, there are
so
days,
simple, man.
I mean, to show up, it's just that you have to show up. That's it. No matter what. Of course, there are days when you want to wake up and you're like, why exactly am I doing what I'm doing? But it's okay to have one day out of 10 days which are like that. You're a real human being with emotions. You are not a robot. But when you show up, it changes everything. 50% of your job is done by just showing up. And last is not last, actually, second last is entrepreneurship not hard. I think we really sort of make one big story about entrepreneurship being hard. I mean, that's such a wrong frame of reference to have in life. Yeah. I mean, how will we have more entrepreneurs in the world if we make this whole thing about mushkile, obstacles, surmount everything? I mean, in this country, we have such beautiful brains and, budding entrepreneurs. Just तरह से हम entrepreneurship story बोलते हैं, the narrative that we've created for entrepreneurship is so wrong, I feel. It's not hard, it's about, like I said, your brain is a meaning-making machine. The world is looked at as that hard. When you are living your life out, it's not hard. It's about what meaning you give it and keep moving forward. Right. So, and last is that you got to have fun doing what you do. And if you stop having fun, the biggest disservice you can do to your life, is live it in stress and anxiety and unhappiness. The universe has your back no matter what. So long as you're honest and you're authentic about what you do, the way universe will take care of you is phenomenal. I mean, if you are happy, you're taken care of. Simple. I mean, I don't know how this connects, but I realize when I'm happy, I'm taken care of. So I think the one thing that I really do to take care of myself is I'm happy.
That's interesting. I wish I would have gone back 20 years and shown my much younger and lot more hairier self this video, and maybe it would have changed a lot of where and what I'm thinking and where I would probably end up being. I think what you're saying is very right. We are a meaning-making machine. For a lot of part of my life, I used to think that we are a money-making machine, and that just doesn't make sense. Though some bankers I know I've worked with in life are crazy money-making machines. That's a different story. But you're a meaning-making machine, and the choice is yours. So there's a beautiful book I read by Kramer called Still Power. He argues कि कुछ नहीं है, whenever you are in trouble or you're thinking and it's not going right, just relax, cool, just relax. शांत हो जाओ. Over a period of time, positive thoughts will take over. Your mind will clear out and it will work. You don't need to really do anything. In a way, that is the genesis of what you're saying. Is saying, just show up, yaar. It's not a bad deal. Shit happens. Upar aaya, niche aaya, kuch bhi hua. Just show up, and showing up one day at a time, being authentic to yourself. I think it's true for non-entrepreneurs as well. But I think it's beautiful for an entrepreneur to understand that, and it's not that complicated. And the more complicated we make it, the more mushkil we make it, the more trouble we get into. No, you're right, Sowmya. I think it's very, very, very profound, and it's not often that I look at it and say, Sara, 20 years back, I wish somebody would have told me this. But just coming one more little angle to it, and before we started, and you said something absolutely beautiful, which I want to go and show to 90% of corporate executives, and I want to show to myself as well. COVID, man, you had a tough year, but you made a statement. Just say that and tell me your story on what you did.
Yeah. No, so I think when COVID hit, it was a very uncertain time. I mean, nobody had seen anything like this. We've seen bad years, but it's like, what are you looking at, right? You don't know what's coming up. we had a good amount of our businesses in retail, significant amount of business that we were doing from retail, which is also a good amount of business that we get from our Middle East offices. There was travel, which was,
totally out. Yeah.
Yeah. And these guys were like at the front line,
True.
and they were the guys to get knocked off. And so, so it was a very uncertain time. And I wasn't sure what pehle month mein, like March, suddenly 40% down on revenue, right? April, 50% down on revenue. Clients have stopped spending, and for a moment you're like, what's
receivables also would have
receivables in the market. But guess what? These are clients who worked with you for years who are in real trouble, man. Right? So how are you going to go out and support them? I think this was this was the first sort of priority. This was priority one for me. How do you stand next to your clients and do what needs to be done to support them, right? So if it meant that we were okay with extending our credit period, we actually sat across the client. My CFO spoke to the client CFO. They charted out a roadmap in a way that we could survive while they managed to survive as well. Then the second big part was employees, and at 50% down revenue, how do you really think about what it's going to
be? And in a total services business, direct impact,
direct impact, right? So obviously the discussions about how do we do it, what is it going to look like, those were all discussions and thoughts that were coming about. But I think the true calling for me was, Sala, एक बुरा साल नहीं निकाला तो क्या धंधा किया? If you're going to pass on your bad year to your employees and lay off people, you're not, what kind of an entrepreneur are you, right? You would then have the same slave mindset. Mera nuksan hua, tumhara bhi nuksan hona chahiye. It doesn't make sense, right? So, and people are not Excel sheets. So I think this was the biggest sort of clearance I got. And like I said, when you do the right thing, universe has your back. Within a couple of months, we scaled back business up. We sharpened our service lines, did what needed to be done. And today we have, as of March, we have actually exceeded our pre-COVID monthly revenue.
Interesting.
Yeah.
With zero layoff and zero salary cut, huh?
Zero layoff, zero salary cuts. Zero layoff, zero salary cuts. Yeah. And I think it's the best decision we made. I mean, imagine, so I did a town hall and I, because there was so much uncertainty. Itna news mein pad rahe the, ye agency ne itne layoff kar diye, wo agency ne itne layoff kar diye. I just did a one-on-one. I think I had the most heartfelt conversation with the employees on the town hall that day. And I said that nobody's going to lose their job. Nobody's going to see a pay cut. And that is my promise to you. But what I would like in return is we may need to work doubly hard and bring this business back. And just the mental stability and a peace of mind, basically, these guys got, them, their families. There is no value you can put to that, And of course, the way it got paid back, like I said, March, we have exceeded our pre-COVID revenue.
Sowmya, this is a fantastic story. And moments like these, see, the life of an entrepreneur is also a very lonely life.
Yeah.
There, you don't have too many people to talk to. You definitely find it very hard to talk to the next level people. You can't, acha, main soch rahi hoon, should we fire people? Should we keep them? What should we do? You can't have those kinds of conversations. So how do you sort of think, at the top?
Yeah,
it's always a big challenge when you look at CEOs. It's never an easy life. I mean, in your case, it's a self-built business, in multi geographies, multi cities, and you're there pretty much on your own. There are no co-founders with whom you can sort of distribute the load. How do you manage all of that?
Yeah. So Rajesh, I think what has worked for me specifically is two things. One is what I know is every story is unique. Okay. So, of course, there is, like what may be working for another business or entrepreneur is not something that will work for me. And therefore, I also believe this whole case study method of learning has its drawbacks, because the dynamics of your life are dynamics of your life. The dynamics of course, there's learning. I'm not saying there's no learning, but decisions have to be um, unique to you. And therefore, what has really played up for me is that I've been very aware of this fact. For me, it's never been about looking at somebody and doing it. It's about what feels right for me. And I think that is something that you tend to get, that entrepreneurs call or intuition. If you just know how to sort of tune into that intuition and find what is the right thing to do, you don't really need to go out and seeking advice and actively sort of saying कि तुम्हारे साथ क्या हो रहा है, मुझे क्या करना चाहिए. I think you got to be learn to listen to yourself. So this is one. The second thing I feel is that you cannot undermine the role of a coach in your life. It's as true as as important as a coach is to sports. I think coach is to a business. But इसमें भी ना दो तरीके के coach होते हैं. I call them as in the court and from the stands. तो जिसको हम कोच बोलते हैं ना, वो ऑन द स्टैंड्स वाला नहीं चाहिए. मोस्ट ऑफ द कोचेस टुडे हैव बिकम ऑन द स्टैंड्स कोच, which doesn't help, because unless you're in the court with me and playing along with me, there's no way you will know what my dynamics are. So I'm fortunate to have a coach who's in the court with me in that sense, right? And so that is also, I think, one very, it's almost like anchoring your soul in some way and saying that what's the direction I need to take, right? So that he is, so that's, he's a sounding board for me. That's a second piece. Yeah, and the third, I think, I want to say something very significant here. It's true that an entrepreneur's life is lonely. Okay. That is because you're always expecting to talk to people who are at the same intellectual wavelength as you are, right? So you feel कि यार कोई और दूसरे orbit में या wavelength में रहेगा तो तुम्हारा जमेगा नहीं उनके साथ, or that you tend to almost look down upon people who are not at the same wavelength as you. I think here is where that makes you lonely. That the tendency to say that I will only talk or be around a certain kind of people makes you lonely, which is where I stress upon the need for heart connections and not just brain connections. I think what we also need to do as entrepreneurs is open up our hearts and connect and speak from our hearts. In heart connections, there are no orbits. There is just love. And when you're able to, have that distinction and have those heart connections, loneliness is then not a part of your dictionary.
Beautifully said. I think this is so instructive, I think, for an entrepreneur to learn from you, Sowmya. Beautifully put.
Thank you, Rajesh.
So, we got about a few minutes more. And one of the aspects I wanted to also cover is really how you look at going back to the business. What are the differences you found between, say, the Indian market and the UAE market? I think you also have, you'll also do work in Africa. So what are the differences that you have found working with the top brands across the region?
So I think what I have seen, India is, of course, it's so many countries within one country, right? And if you crack the code for India, then you can crack the code for any geography in the world. So for me, in some sense, India has been a huge learning ground. So as a market, I feel it's a huge, huge learning ground for us. We test all our innovations in India. We see what works, and otherwise, what I also feel is that. And at the end of India is also a very competitive market in that sense, right? So itne players hai, itna bada country hai, entry barrier sometimes is very, very low for competition. So while it's a huge learning ground and it's also a fantastic, like I said, seat for innovation, and adoption of innovation is also very high in India. I think as a business, your margins tend to, not look that great. It's not bad, but definitely other markets tend to be at least 20-25% better in terms of margins. So, but otherwise, India mein jo successful raha hai, we've been able to, that you're able to take to some other markets and implement it, we know that it's going to see success. So the hard work is actually done in India, and then we are able to multiply that in other countries.
And one sort of linked question. You've built a services business. The temptation to do products would definitely have crossed your mind, because you see the SaaS companies, in tech. You've got a very strong tech background. So, have you thought about that? I mean, do you think that's what you're going to look at going forward?
Yeah. And I believe that's going to be, in some sense, the next orbit of our own growth. Okay. I didn't want to, and very consciously so, jump into a product conversation before, we'd really cracked something that's unique for us, and now with DFA, I believe that we are very well poised to say that now this can be productized in a meaningful way. So it's not product for the sake of product, but it's a product that can actually add value, right? So I think that's going to be the next orbit for us. And, as we sort of expand in more countries, that's one of these, sort of growth areas that we're looking at going forward actively.
Interesting. I think we've nearly reached towards the end of the conversation. Rajesh, any last questions from your side? I'm pretty overwhelmed by a lot of what Sowmya has said. Any last covering points from your side?
No, I think it's been a fantastic sort of journey. I mean, as Sowmya has taken us from our early days and how she built up DViO through the years. And I think also looking forward, I think the framework that she described in terms of both the technologies, etc., and what's to come. And I think very importantly, entrepreneurship मुश्किल चीज नहीं है.
I agree. किसी ने मेरे को समझाया होता.
Entrepreneurship simplified, I think, which is so well done. I think it's almost like, you take life as it comes. You go in there with a positive spirit. And there's always mountains which are there to climb. And that's what Sowmya has been doing, climbing one mountain after another since age 16. Yeah,
it's been lovely. So I would agree with you. It's a lot of simplicity of entrepreneurship that Sowmya tries to bring to the table. And her, what I've always found very interesting whenever I've spoken to her, the life में इतना complication नहीं चाहिए. ये है, धंधा है, करने का है, और क्या है, means outcome है, measure करने का है और improve करने का है. What is so tough about it? And which is actually right. And if you have the ability to think that simple, and you know that इतना पैसा तो मैं कर लूंगी, इतना पैसा तो बना लेंगे, इतना confidence है, घर को गिरवी रख दो. The old days, those old movies, I think people like me who were born in 70s grew up in those Rajesh Khanna movies. जब घर गिरवी रखता तो घर खत्म हो जाता है. I think that those movies have done a big discover to entrepreneurship. Sowmya has not seen any of those.
Yes,
so I think. So it's one of those things. No? The bumblebee, according to scientists, cannot fly because it has a certain wingspan, certain body ratio, etc. And it should never fly. But the bumblebee doesn't know this, so it continues to fly.
Exactly. Got it.
So I said, beautiful bumblebee who doesn't get to about the world. मेरे को ये करने का, मेरे को ये चाहिए. And I've seen her over the years. She's extremely committed, extremely driven, very honest and true to herself. And what you're seeing on the screen is exactly what Sowmya is in real life. Clean, decluttered conversations that you tend to have. And I think today my big one that I'm going to take back and some way frame it. Sometimes I have a socialist side of me, which I really believe in at points. And sometimes I fight with the capitalist side of me. And I don't know sometimes which one wins. Sometimes I feel, no, it's right. Capital must be preserved at all costs. No, sometimes people should be preserved at all costs. But at the end of it, Sowmya has managed, like DFA, reconciliation of opposites. She's managed to reconcile these opposites and say, sab chodo. एक बुरा साल धंधा नहीं किया तो क्या धंधा किया. This is my big takeaway. It is far more deeper than probably it seems at the start. But this is Sowmya for you and an amazing info brain. Thank you, Sowmya, for being with us.